Welcome to this Good Friday service. People who are here in the church, and welcome to people online as well. Wherever you are on your life path, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Good Friday is a hard day, but it's good that you're here. Together, we recall the suffering of Christ and the brokenness of our world. There are profound mysteries in the events of Golgotha. We struggle to make sense of Christ's death. We struggle to understand the cross. But through it all, we hold fast to the Holy One's abiding love. And we think of the forgiveness offered even to the perpetrators of violence. However you come today, with heaviness of heart or with inner joy, with pain in body or in mind, with renewed energy for life, come as you are, open to hear the word you need to hear, the word that touches your heart and enlivens your mind. Today, we leave the service in silence. You are welcome to linger at the end in a prayerful space, and if you'd like a deeper level, there are people here who would sit with you. Holy Saturday, we hold the space here between death and resurrection from 10 till 12:30. A time of reflection and meditation. You can come and go as it suits you. On Sunday, we return in a joyful mood, and so now we begin the Easter process.
At daybreak, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took formal action against Jesus to put him to death. They bound him and led him away to be handed over to Pilate, the governor. When he saw that Jesus had been condemned, Judas, who had betrayed Jesus, felt remorse. He took the 30 pieces of silver back to the chief priests and elders and said, "I have sinned. I have betrayed innocent blood." "What's that to us?" they answered. "That's your affair." So Judas flung the money into the sanctuary and left. Then he went off and hanged himself.
Then Jesus was arraigned before Pontius Pilate, the governor, who questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "You say that I am." Yet when Jesus was accused by the chief priests and elders, he made no reply. Pilate said to Jesus, surely you hear how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus did not answer Pilate on a single count, much to the governor's surprise.
He met their rage with silence. He did not remonstrate with authority or beg for mercy. He stood firmly, silent in the midst of false witness. The case against him was weak, full of contradiction. How much could his love bear? There was no wavering on the way to the cross, although the body was weak and dropped the load. The cries from the cross were wholly human. We hold each word in silence or contemplate in music. For such mysteries we have no words. We can only feel and trust in the grace of God in silence.
Now, on the occasion of a festival, the governor was accustomed to release one prisoner, whomever the crowd would designate. At the time, they were holding a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So when the crowd gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you wish me to release for you? Barabbas or Jesus, the so-called Messiah?" Pilate knew, of course, that it was out of jealousy that they had handed Jesus over. And when Pilate was still presiding on the bench, his wife sent him a message. "Have nothing to do with that innocent man. I had a dream about him last night, which has been troubling me all day." But the chief priests and elders convinced the crowds that they should ask for Barabbas and have Jesus put to death. So when the governor asked them, "Which one do you want me to release for you?" they all cried, "Barabbas!" Pilate said to them, "Then what am I to do with Jesus, the so-called Messiah?" "Crucify him," they all said. "Why? What crime has he committed?" Pilate asked. But they only shouted louder, "Crucify him!" Pilate finally realised that he was getting nowhere. In fact, a riot was breaking out. Pilate called for water and, washing his hands in front of the crowd, declaring as he did so, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." The whole crowd said in reply, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." At that, Pilate released Barabbas to them. But he had Jesus whipped, then handed him over to be crucified.
The governor's soldiers took Jesus inside the praetorium and assembled the whole cohort around him. They stripped off his clothes and wrapped him in a scarlet military cloak. Weaving a crown out of thorns, They pressed it onto his head and stuck a reed in his right hand. Then they began to mock Jesus by dropping to their knees, saying, "All hail, King of the Jews!" They also spat at him. Afterwards, they took hold of the reed and struck Jesus on the head. Finally, when they had finished mocking him, they stripped him of the cloak, dressed him in his own clothes, and led him off to crucifixion.
On their way out, they met a Cyrenian named Simon, whom they pressed into service to carry the cross. Upon arriving at a site called Golgotha, which means place of the skulls, they gave Jesus a drink of wine mixed with a narcotic herb, which Jesus tasted but refused to drink. Once they had nailed Jesus to the cross, they divided his clothes among them by rolling dice. Then they sat down and kept watch over him. Above his head, they put the charge against him in writing: "This is Jesus, King of the Jews."
Two robbers were crucified along with Jesus, one at his right and one at his left. People going by insulted Jesus, shaking their heads and saying, "So you are the one who was going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days? Save yourself, why don't you? Come down off that cross if you are God's own." The chief priests, the religious scholars, and the elders also joined in the jeering. "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. So he's the King of Israel? Let's see him come down from that cross, and then we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now, if God is happy with him. After all, he claimed to be God's own son." The robbers who had been crucified with Jesus jeered at him in the same way.
Let us join in a responsive psalm. My God, Why have you forsaken me? O my God, I cry to you in the daytime. I groan in the watches of the night. My strength drains away like water. My heart in the midst of my body. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My hands and feet are withered.
At noon, a darkness fell over the whole land until about 3 in the afternoon. At that hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" My God, why have you forsaken me?" This made some of the bystanders who heard it remark, "He's calling for Elijah." One of them hurried off and got a sponge. He soaked the sponge in cheap wine and, sticking it on a reed, tried to make Jesus drink. The others said, "Leave him alone. Let's see whether Elijah comes to his rescue." Once again, Jesus cried out in a loud voice. Then he gave up his spirit.
A poem by Denise Levertov on a theme from Julian of Norwich's chapter 20. 6 hours outstretched in the sun, yes. Hot wood, the nails, blood trickling into the eyes, yes. But the thieves on their neighbour crosses survived till after the soldiers had come to fracture their legs, or longer. Why single out the agony? What's a mere 6 hours? Torture then, torture now, the same. The pain's the same. Immemorial branding iron, electric prod. Hasn't a child dazed in the hospital ward they reserve for the most abused known worse? The air we're breathing, these very clouds, ephemeral billows languid upon the sky's moody ocean, we share with women and men who've held out days and weeks on the rack. And in the ancient dust of the world, what particles of the long tormented, what ashes. But Julian's lucid spirit leapt to the difference perceived why no awe could measure that brief day's endless length, why among all the tortured one only is king of grief. The one-ing she saw, the one-ing with the Godhead opened him utterly to the pain of all minds, all bodies, sands of the sea, of the desert, from the beginning to last day. The great wonder is that the human cells of his flesh and bone didn't explode when utmost imagination rose in that flood of knowledge. Unique in agony, infinite strength, incarnate, empowered him to endure inside of history through those hours when he took to himself the sum total of anguish and drank even the lees of that cup. Within the mesh of the web, himself woven within it, yet seeing it whole. Every sorrow and desolation he saw and sorrowed in kinship.
Suddenly, the curtain in front of the Holy of Holies was ripped in half from top to bottom. The centurion and his cohort, who were standing guard over Jesus' body, were terror-stricken at seeing the earthquake and all that was happening, and said, "Clearly, this was God's own Son." A group of women were present, looking on from a distance. These were the same women who had followed Jesus from Galilee as ministers to him.
When evening fell, a wealthy man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had become a disciple of Jesus, came to request the body of Jesus. Pilate issued an order for its release. Taking the body, Joseph wrapped it in fresh linen and laid it in his own tomb, which had been hewn out of rock. Then Joseph rolled a huge stone across the entrance of the tomb and went away. But Mary of Magdala and the other Mary remained sitting there, facing the tomb.
As an act of reverence, you're invited to come forward and choose some herbs to lay on the cross and on the shroud. So you may like to actually crush the leaves and release the scent before you lay it on the cross.
And receive this blessing by Jan Richardson called What Abides. You will know this blessing by how it does not stay still, by the way it refuses to rest in one place. You will recognize it by how it takes first one form, then another, now running down the face of the mother, who watches the breaking of the child she has borne. Now, in the stance of the woman who followed him here and will not leave him bereft. Now, it twists in anguish on the mouth of the friend whom he loved. Now, it bears itself in the wound, the cry, the finishing and final breath. This blessing is not in any one of these alone. It is what binds them together. It is what dwells in the space between them, though it be torn and gaping. It is what abides in the tear the rending makes.